Hey everybody, it's Nate from Ranch Foods Direct. Today we're going to be making some corned beef in preparation for making a corned beef and cabbage stew, and we're also going to do some pastrami with some of this corned beef as well. So to start with, I've got a nice piece of brisket that I pulled out. One of our own. It's been trimmed and mostly kind of cleaned up. I'm going to do a little bit more trimming because some of it is a little bit thin on one side, and I've got all the spices and seasonings I'm going to need to cure this. We're going to be doing a dry cure in a vacuum bag, so vacuum all the air out and seal it so that it'll cure a little bit quicker than if I was just doing it in water or just a dry brine exposed to the elements. So, like I said, this is a little bit thin on one end. I'm going to actually kind of cut it back where we got a pretty decent thickness. So see, it's kind of thin on that. We're just going to set that aside. We'll probably throw that back into grind and make some burgers out of it. Other than that, it looks like we're doing pretty good here. A little bit more trimming on the side. Kind of clean it up, make it nice and pretty. All right, doing pretty good. We don't have a whole lot of flat with this one, so we'll end up probably about that much of this will end up going into our corned beef and cabbage stew, and the rest of it we'll use for pastrami. So to do a cure, I need to make sure that I know what the weight of this piece of meat is, so that I only use the amount of pink salt and sea salt that is needed for curing. So we're gonna weigh it, and I'm gonna do it in grams. That's more accurate. So I've got 3,650 grams. So for pink salt, we use 1/4% of that, and we use 2.5% of sea salt. 3,650 grams. And we're going to multiply that by 0.0025. That's 1/4%, and that gives us 9.125 grams. For salt, fine sea salt, we want a finer salt product. Kosher salt, the flakes are too big, so if that's all you have, I would throw it into a coffee grinder or something to break it up a little bit and make it really small, or get some fine sea salt would be the recommendation. So again, we're going to start with the weight of our brisket, it's 3,650, and we're going to multiply that by 0.025, which is 2.5%, 91.25 grams of sea salt. And if you want to if you wanted a little less salty, you can do a little bit less of the fine salt. That's absolutely fine. I ended up with actually about 80 grams of salt. I've done this recipe before, and I don't want to have a salt bomb with the meat. I just want it to be just right. So I've learned to lessen it just a little bit. 2.5% is the standard. Start with that. If you don't like it, maybe do it a little bit less next time. Or if you know that you're going to want it a little less salty, do a little bit less than what 2.5% is, maybe 2%. The rest of the seasoning blend for this brisket, we're going to start with some brown sugar. I got about maybe 3 tablespoons of brown sugar. It's about 30 grams is what I'm using. And then I've got the rest of everything that I have here, some whole seasonings, some whole mustard, some black peppercorns, some allspice berries. I've got some coriander seeds, some bay leaf, and some whole cloves. I just got 6 whole cloves. The rest of the spices are about 2 tablespoons per, and about 6 bay leaves. So for the bay leaves, I'm just going to kind of crunch them up. And for everything else, we're going to throw it in probably in a couple of rounds. I've just got a coffee grinder right here that has a nice pulse feature on it, because I don't want these seasonings to be completely ground up. I'm not looking for super fine. I just want them to be smaller than this. If I was doing a brine for this brisket, for this corned beef, I would leave all these seasonings whole and just leave them in the water. We're going to add the fine salt and the pink salt. Got a big bag that we're gonna fit this in. And like I said, if you don't have vacuum sealing and capabilities at home, you could absolutely leave it in this tray that you're putting the spices on. You're just gonna wanna flip it every day to make sure that you're getting even coating, and then you wanna make sure and put the spices back onto it so that it's adhering to the meat. We vacuum sealed this. Everything's nice and tight against the meat, looking pretty good. I'm gonna throw this in the fridge. It'll probably be about 4 days total, maybe 5. We're gonna flip it every single day and make sure that we get a nice penetration of the spices and the seasonings. And then we will be ready to cook it up for soup and pastrami next week. Since we're turning half of our corned beef into pastrami, I figured what better thing to have to go with a hot pastrami sandwich than some fresh made pickles. And then we're gonna make some fresh mustard as well to put on our beautiful rye bread pastrami sandwiches. So to start with, I'm making enough pickles for 2 quart jars. The recipe that I'll put online to go along with this will have enough ingredients for 1 quart worth of pickles. So I've doubled up everything because I'm making 2 different styles. I've got some mini seedless cucumbers that we're going to do into wedges for putting on the side of our sandwich. And I got a English cucumber that I'm going to do into rounds for putting on the sandwich as well. We've also got some onion and garlic and some pickling spices that we're going to put in there. The jars already have a few sprigs of fresh dill. If you can't find fresh dill, I'll put it in the ingredient, the recipe list. Probably about a teaspoon or 2 of dill, of dried dill, if you don't have fresh, per quart. All right, I'm gonna get started with onions and garlic. Just gonna do nice half moon slices of these onions. And our garlic cloves, we're not gonna smash these or chop them, we're just gonna give them a light little crush just to open them up a little bit. Throw those in. For the seasoning mix, I've got some black pepper, whole black pepper, I've got whole coriander, I've got whole mustard, I've got whole allspice, I've got half a cinnamon stick that I've kind of crumbled up. I've got a bay leaf, and I've got some red pepper flake. I'm gonna add that to each of these. Kind of shake it up so it gets kind of distributed in there. Now we're gonna get into the cucumbers. So I got these seedless cucumbers right now. I'm gonna make sure that they're gonna fit in that jar. So we'll cut them about right there. There we go. So for pickling brine, I have learned to always make a lot more pickling brine than you need. So the recipe that I'll do, I'll put down the ingredients for 1 quart of pickling liquid. We won't use all of it because we filled up most of the quart in the pickle jars with cucumbers and other vegetables and stuff like that. But we're making more. It's always better to have more than not enough. So I've got a quart of water. For the recipe, it'll be just 2 cups of water and a quart of white vinegar, distilled white vinegar. For the recipe, it'll just be 2 cups. We're gonna start heating this. And to that, I'm gonna add, I've got a half cup of sugar, just white sugar. You can use brown sugar if you'd rather. You can use turbinado sugar. You can use honey. You can use maple syrup. Lots of different options. The real purpose of the sugar is to kind of cut the bittering factors and the saltiness from the salt and other things that we're putting in. It's just kind of mild the flavors out. I got a 1/4 cup of fine sea salt. This is real salt from Redmond, Utah. We sell that in our markets, and I got about a half teaspoon of some ground ginger. I'm gonna heat all this and mix it together. I'm gonna heat it until all the salt and sugar and ginger is completely melted into the water. All right, so the liquid is starting to heat up. We're starting to get some steam. It's about to hit a simmer. We don't need a full rolling boil on this. We just want all the solids to dissolve and get kind of warm. And now we're just gonna pour this over our pickles. Just make it a little messy, so you may want to do it next to your sink so it's easy to just kind of clean off. Fill that all the way to the brim. And kind of push this down just a little bit, make sure that there's no little hidden pockets of air or anything in there. If we need to add some more liquid to it. Just a little more here. All right, then the lids go on. Make sure you got a nice tight seal. And these are just gonna sit on the counter until they cool off. Once they cool off, we're gonna put them in the fridge. They'll technically be ready to eat tomorrow, but give them about a week and they will be fantastic pickles. Let's make some mustard. So for this one, it's pretty easy, fairly simple set of ingredients. If you want to come on in here and check it out. We got about a 1/4 cup of dry mustard, ground mustard, or 4 tablespoons. Got an 1/8 of a teaspoon of turmeric. Got a little more than half a teaspoon of fine sea salt. We got an 1/8 of a teaspoon of paprika, an 1/8 of a teaspoon of garlic powder, granulated garlic, and a half a teaspoon of all-purpose flour. If you're gluten-free and don't want to add flour to it, you can substitute cornstarch, no problem whatsoever. Also got about a 1/4 cup of water and about 3 tablespoons of a white wine vinegar. I'm gonna mix all these together first. Try and break up as many clumps as possible. I'm gonna add the vinegar and the water. And fire up the heat. On a nice low heat here, we're not trying to cook it, we're just trying to kind of evaporate the water a little bit and let the flour do its business and kind of thicken things up a little bit. That's about all the evaporation that we really need. It's still a little thin, but as it cools, it will set up quite nicely. I got a little bit that I made earlier today. You can see it's just that perfect consistency that you want out of a nice yellow mustard. So our corned beef had been doing a dry brine in vacuum bag for about 7 days. You can do a little bit less, a little bit more. It's kind of forgiving. We're going to be just using the flat part of this and making this beautiful corned beef and cabbage stew. But before we get all started on that, I'm going to turn up my, I have a Dutch oven and start heating that up. I'm going to do it at about a medium high temperature. Nothing crazy, I just want it to be warm for sweating the vegetables. While that's heating up, I'm going to start with my onion. Now we got our brisket here. I'm gonna cut it about right here. I'm looking for about 3 to 4 pounds. So I've got my point on this side. I've got just a little bit of flat on this one. So we're gonna cut it right through there. There's the point side. You see we got nice penetration with that sodium nitrate, getting the cure all the way through, nice pink color. I'm actually gonna cut off some of this fat here. I don't want a whole lot of fat in the stew. That looks pretty good. I'm gonna cut this into quarters. You wanna leave it in fairly big pieces. We don't wanna cut it down into dice or slices before going into this. If you leave it whole, you can deal with it later on, but I wanna cook it a little bit quicker than leaving it whole, so that's why I'm gonna cut it into quarters. There we go. 4 nice pieces of corned beef. So now we're gonna get started sweating our vegetables. Got a couple of tablespoons of a decent quality olive oil. You want something that tastes pretty good here, so you're not looking for a neutral oil necessarily. Hot pan, cold oil, get that going. Once we got it well heated up, we're gonna add our onions. I'm gonna add a pinch of salt right now to help draw moisture out of the onions. I'm also gonna add just a touch of black pepper. So our onions are kind of translucent, taking on a little bit of color, a little caramelization. We're gonna add the carrots now. We'll get that started. Carrots have been going for just a little bit. They're starting to soften up just a touch. They're still quite firm. I'm not looking to cook them all the way, just trying to get a little bit of color and just get them started on the cooking process. I'm gonna add the garlic now. Always add the garlic towards the end because it will overcook quickly and you don't want to burn the garlic. And we're just going to give that about 30 seconds to a minute so we can start smelling the garlic, and then we'll add a couple of bay leaves, and I've got let's call it a fistful of thyme, about 10 to 12 sprigs. I tied them together so that it's easy to find the stems. Some of the leaves will come off in the stew and that's perfectly fine. We just want to make it easy to find the stems when we will pull it out. All right, starting to smell the garlic. We're gonna add the bay leaf and the thyme. Just cook those down just a little bit. Now I'm gonna add, I got 48 ounces of chicken stock. Add that to the pot. We're gonna bring this to a simmer, and then we'll add our corned beef. Stock is starting to come up to a simmer. We're going to add our meat in here, trying to get it submerged as much as possible. Now we're going to cover and let that stew for about 2 hours. It's been about an hour and a half. Our brisket's looking real nice. We've reduced the liquid just a little bit. I had the cover cracked just a little bit to let some of the moisture evaporate out. Doing real good. So now we're gonna cut up some cabbage and some potatoes and add that to it. So while the liquid is reduced, don't add more liquid because the cabbage is actually gonna bring a lot of liquid to the party. So I've got 2 pounds of gold potatoes. If you peel potatoes ahead of time, just submerging them in some water will prevent them from browning. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to cut them into fairly large pieces. We got a nice head of green cabbage. A Napa cabbage would also work pretty well. We're gonna cut that sucker in half, and then we're gonna pour it out. then we're just going to slice it in about 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch pieces. I got a bunch of parsley here. We're going to cut off probably about that much of the leaves there. We're going to kind of roughly chop this. We're going to add in our chopped potatoes. And our cabbage. Probably won't be able to get all this cabbage in at once in the pot this size. You might consider using a slightly larger pot. Just going to add as much as I can get in here, and I'll come back and check in about 1/2 hour. It should have reduced quite a bit, and I'll be able to fit some more in there. Oh yeah, I got about 1/2 of that head of cabbage in there. Should be pretty good. All right, recover, let her go for a couple more hours. All right, we got that chopped parsley that we did earlier. We're gonna just add this in, stir it in. Go. Corned beef and cabbage stew. All right, everyone, we're going to start with our pastrami today. First things first, we got to crack up some spices. I've got some whole coriander. We got about 1/4 cup of that. And I've got some black pepper, whole black pepper, about 1/4 cup as well. We're going to do a rough grind on these because we want them fairly large pieces. So I'm just going to do one at a time in my little coffee grinder, spice grinder thing here. Just kind of pulse it a little bit, trying to break everything up. Not trying to turn it into fine ground black pepper. There we go. So there's still going to be some whole pieces, that's fine. There we go. Nice spice rub for our pastrami. All right, I just got a couple tablespoons of a neutral oil. I'm using sunflower, whatever neutral oil floats your boat. We're just looking to use it as a binder. So I'm going to puncture just a couple of holes in the foil. Nothing big, nothing crazy. I want a little bit of drainage, but not a whole lot of drainage. And I've got a wire rack and a shallow pan here. I'm gonna add a little bit of water to this. I'm gonna be cooking this at about 300 degrees in the oven. And I wanna try and combat shrinkage as much as possible. If you have the time, cooking it at 200 degrees, it's probably better, but it'll take you probably 10 to 12 hours to do a brisket. So we're trying to speed up the process just a little bit. We're going to cook it at 300 degrees, and hopefully we'll have some sandwiches by lunchtime. All right, to the oven. So we got some fantastic New York rye from our friends over at Sourdough Boulangerie. We've got our mustard that we made from scratch. We got our pickles. We'll put a wedge on the side, and we'll put some slices along with some of the pickled onions on the sandwich itself. Time to build. we go. Beautiful pastrami sandwich.